terms, three important terms in the church. And we have to make distinction between these three terms. The first one is theology. There are people who consider themselves theologians. There are people in the church calls theologians. So, if they are theologians, what do? They actually study theology. And what does theology mean as a word? It's the study of God based on divine revelation. Do we do theology here? Based on this definition, do we do theology here? Yes, we do theology here. We study God based on divine revelation. Two Greek words, important Greek words. One is theos. You remember, one of the titles of the Blessed Virgin Mary was Theotokos. Theotokos. Tokos meaning bearer. The word tokos means bearer. Theo is God, so bearer of God. It's a very appropriate name, Theotokos, because the Blessed Mother had God inside her womb for 9 months. That's why the church calls her, one of the titles is Theotokos, bearer of God. And Theos is, of course, God. Logos is study. That's why in the English language you see a lot of words like anthropology, archaeology, biology, right? All of this logi is from the Greek word logos, meaning study. It's good to know these things, so at least you know where these words come from. Okay, so that's theology. So theology is pretty basic and it's pretty broad. We study God based on divine revelation. Because some people do you remember the name Plato and Aristotle? These people, they were philosophers. And they studied God, but not based on divine revelation. They studied God based on philosophical assumptions and suppositions. So, that's theology all right, because they studied God. So the church has confined the word theology to mean the study of God based on divine revelation. So as far as the church goes, this is what theology is. So you can study about God, but if it's not based on divine revelation, the church says, well, that's your theology, but not the church. Alright? The second word is doctrine. And this is the definition of doctrine. It's a proposition taught by the magisterium of the Catholic Church. What is magisterium? It's from the Greek word magister. That's from the Greek word magister. Magisterium. Magister is teaching. So, magisterium of the Catholic Church. The best way to understand the magisterium of the Catholic Church is this. Look at the U.S. government setup. We have the executive branch, we have the legislative branch, and we have the judiciary, right? So we have President Obama here, we have Congress here, the Senate and the House of Representatives, that's the legislative, and then we have the judiciary, the Supreme Court. The magisterium of the Catholic Church can be compared to the judiciary. Understand? That's the judiciary. That's the Supreme Court in the church. That's the best analogy I can think of. In other words, when the Supreme Court says, and when the Supreme Court rules in the federal government, that's period. End of the discussion. No more talking. Understand? No more questions. The Supreme Court has spoken. The same way in the church. After the magisterium speaks and rules on something, that's the end of the discussion. That's a period. No more talking. Everybody abides when the magisterium speaks. So it's the equivalent of the Supreme Court. That's the best way to explain this. That's the reason why this is also quite incidental. The other groups, Christian groups, which do not recognize the Pope, the non-Catholic Christians, they recognize the Bible, all right. The Bible can be compared to the Constitution, right? This can be compared to the Constitution and the laws of the land. Now, there have been, and it's obvious, throughout 2,000 years of history, there have been disputes and arguments about what this book says. You agree? Well, there have been plenty of arguments about this book. And those are arguments don't end. They are the arguments that keep on going and going and going and never end. And the reason that happens is because there's no Supreme Court to decide. In the Catholic Church, it's very simple. There's argument between two bishops, or two priests, or two clergymen, and they based on the book. And what happens? It gets escalated to the magisterium. The magisterium will speak. The Pope, in union with the bishops, will speak. This is the opinion. This is the doctrine of the church. And that's the end of the discussion. That's a period right there. No comma, no semicolon. It's period. Understand? That's the best way to understand this concept. It's from the Latin word doctrina. Doctrina, you can infer from the word, it's doctrine. The difference between doctrine and dogma is the doctrine is not necessarily infallibly defined. In other words, unless it's manifestly evident, even if it's taught by the magisterium of the church, it's not necessarily infallible. You understand infallibility, right? Infallibility means it's not necessarily imposed on everyone forever. No. A doctrine of the church can change. What cannot change is the dogma. Because the church dogma is a divinely revealed truth. You see the difference? A dogma is a divinely revealed truth. A doctrine is just a proposition. It's only a proposition or a set of propositions from men. And then studied by the magisterium and probably taught by the magisterium. Okay. It makes sense. Okay, they teach it. But it's not necessarily infallible compared to a dogma. Look at the dogma. It's binding on all the faithful without exception, now and forever. Now and forever. What's an example of a dogma? Example of a dogma? Oh, really? The assumption of the Blessed Mother, Immaculate Conception, Incarnation. The real presence of Jesus, the Eucharist, the seven sacraments. These are all dogmas. And they're binding on all the faithful without exception. In other words, if you're faithful, you must believe that. You must believe it. And guess what? It's now and forever. It's not just, okay, it's binding for the next year. No. It's now and forever. That's a dogma. It's from the Greek word, the same, dogma, meaning opinion. The meaning of this Greek word is opinion. But the church takes this very seriously. A church dogma, you must abide by it. You must believe it. You must subscribe to it. And it's binding on all faith. So if it's a dogma, like December 8th, Immaculate Conception. Look, September 8th. Do you know this September 8th is a day of obligation? It's a day of obligation. December 8th is a day of obligation. Why? Because it's a dogma. It's a dogma. What about what can you think that's not everybody should, you don't have to go to Mass necessarily. Can you think of something? Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday is a doctrine. Ash Wednesday is not a dogma. Although the Bible says, from dust to dust you shall return. But you don't have to go to Mass on Ash Wednesday. A lot of people think they do have to. And it's quite amazing. Ash Wednesday is one of those days when the parking lot is packed to the full. Because everybody wants the ash. Everybody. Even those whom you do not see in the Mass throughout the rest of the year. Ash Wednesday, they want the ashes. Even Mr. Giuliani wants an ash here. Everybody wants an ash on Ash Wednesday. The church says you're not obligated to go to Mass on Ash Wednesday. But it's not a verse. A lot of people take it so seriously, everybody comes to Mass on Ash Wednesday. See the difference? But December 8th, you must. December 8th, you must. I have here a summary of how to go through this. There's a new, I don't know if you were listening to the news yesterday, this little, less than a business card size papyrus that says, Jesus, quoting Jesus, my wife. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll talk a little bit about that. Anyway, here it is. A theologian proposes a way of understanding the revelation God has given the church. I will connect all these three, okay? I will connect these three. A theologian would propose some way of understanding certain things to the church. So that's theology, of course. Now, if the magisterium, if the church deems that this is valuable and important contribution to the understanding of divine revelation, then the church can decide to teach it as a doctrine. If the church deems that it's valuable and significant to understanding divine revelation. Please remember that the only objective here is to understand divine revelation. It's not to make someone happy. It's not to make someone known. No, none of those. The only end is for greater understanding of divine revelation. Divine revelation has a name. His name is Jesus Christ. A lot of people think, oh, divine revelation. Of course, the church talks about a deposit of faith. But that deposit of faith centers on Jesus Christ. No. So, if a controversy over the teaching arises at some point, then the church will decide. A good example of this is, remember what is this that you say this and you will earn certain, Banji would know this. It skips my head right now. You know what I'm talking about, right? You will earn. Yeah. What's that? Indulgence. Indulgence, yeah. This is an example of a doctrine. Somebody proposed it. Remember, it's a proposition. Somebody proposed it, and it was studied by the church. So the church decided it's important enough. So the church thought, okay, yes, there will be occasions when you can earn some indulgences. So for a lighter in the state process of purgatory, right? Lighter, whatever you call it. You know what I mean? Praying the rosary, saying novenas for 9 days, those sort of things. Those are propositions. And so, when controversies arise as a result of those, like what happened during the Reformation, there was a big controversy because some priests started selling indulgences. Give me this and give me your harvest, and I will infer to you 100 indulgences, something like that, which became corruption. It's a corruption, right? So controversies arose as a result. So what did the church do? The church, although the church has not removed the indulgences from here, it's still here. I know, I check it. It's still here, but it's not emphasized too much. It's not emphasized too much. What I'm telling you is directly from the mouth of clergy, priests and deacons and bishops. The church still teaches indulgence, all right, but it's not emphasized right now. It's not emphasized. It's still here. Because the bottom line is this, which will take us to this discussion. The bottom line is we can never earn our salvation. You must remember that. A lot of people, see, that's the big problem. I actually raised this point to the leaders of the church. If we make people think that they can earn salvation. Oh, if I do this, if I pray this, I get indulgence. If I go to Mass on this day, 1 indulgence. If I do this and that, 2 indulgences. So it's like a bank. It's like a bank account where I can keep depositing. But what would a normal person think? That normal person would think, oh, I have earned my salvation. I have so many indulgences. You understand? But the church teaches, let's not forget, the church teaches that we can never earn salvation. Never. I don't care if you have 2 trillion indulgences. You still are not worthy to go to heaven. So what the church teaches is, it pertains to your marks of sin. It pertains to your sacrifices in the process of purgatory. But entering heaven is a different story. It's a different issue. You don't earn your salvation. Only God's gift can save you. And what is most precious to God's gift? Jesus. Jesus. What could be more precious than the incarnation of God? Became true God and true man. Jesus Christ. So Jesus is the only way to heaven. There's no other way. Not those indulgences. That's the reason why the church, because of those controversies, have toned down the issues on. Have you heard of anyone talking about indulgences? Not maybe because it happened to be part of our topic this week. That's why I'm talking about it. Otherwise, it's not talked about. You don't hear about it plenty. If you go to St. Joseph Seminary, there's a professor there of moral theology who talks about indulgences. It's a good way to put